Mhm. There are those in police departments that say, well, he can just yell his brains out because we're not going to enforce his rights. Yeah. Um, you might not enforce my civil rights. You might not enforce the rights that I have in the Constitution. Yeah. You might not enforce my state rights. Yeah. But not enforcing my reproductive rights, ooch, is going to be international. So whomever it is that has this idea that you have no right to your own sperm, yes, your own gestating baby, or the follicles of your wife, poop, you'll find out. Now, I spent the last 3 years explaining to you that my civil rights are being violated. Instead of enforcing them, yeah, you decided to arrest me for crimes I didn't commit. Then you used fraudulent mental health evaluations to say I was incompetent to stand trial. Oh. But when I had read here in this manual, both legislative and judicial efforts have improved. The ability and flexibility of the courts to respond to allegations of abuse or neglect. Courts now have more alternatives and resources with which to work with when faced with a case where abuse or neglect has been established by the required burden of proof under state law. Sign here. The required burden of proof. Yes. Now, this is going to be a huge lawsuit because when you issued this dissolution of marriage, I did not get any of the documentation, yes, that would have established the required burden of proof, yes, that I was abusive to my wife or sons. Now, an arrest on Guam for the allegation of domestic violence and child abuse, I did 7 hours of parenting classes. My record was expunged in 2012. I never attempted to violate any of your court orders, and instead of acknowledge right now the burden of proof. You decided to say that I was in Sequim, Washington when I wasn't. Oh. And I gave you the actual evidence that I wasn't there. Oh. And then you decided to say I was in Brennan, Washington when I wasn't. And I emailed you the actual evidence that I wasn't there. Then you said I was cyber stalking. Yes. When I wasn't. Anybody could have sent that email. Then, you issued a protection order for 10 years. And the only, well, burden of proof of abuse or neglect. Now, today, yes, I sent you the burden of proof required under state law. Yes, that my sons are in the wrong grades. Ooch. And then I made some videos about the burden of proof. If anything I'm saying is true, then the burden of proof will be for me to prove, yes, that my wife used my sperm, my reproductive rights without my consent. Oh. And she decided to harvest her follicles from her ovaries while my son was gestating in her womb. Now, officer, you might not want to enforce my civil rights, but I, as an American citizen, am going to sue you in every jurisdiction of the world for your refusal to enforce my reproductive rights. Okay, officer? Now, I sent you 2,300,000 emails. You made me go to court numerous times when you had the fucking evidence. You wouldn't allow for the suppression of evidence because you wouldn't admit the evidence. Now, this whole idea, the general or common court system, the powers of the courts, and the rights of parents and children in child maltreatment cases. I would say, yes, it was not just baby abduction from Guam. Yes, it is definitely child maltreatment to use any sort of ultrasound while a baby is gestating in the womb. Sheriff, The court never had any power, but I've always had the right as a parent to father my 5 sons and find out what my wife did with my sperm and what she did with her ovarian follicles and when it was that she did it. Now, you can sit there every fucking day, but refusing to enforce my reproductive rights is international lawsuits. See our marriage certificates from the United Nations. It's bad enough that you allowed for a dissolution of marriage where you had no power or authority as a court. And then you commit the fraud of me not getting notices. And then you threaten me with child support. Ouch! But I'll make absolutely fucking sure that every cop can go to prison for violating my right to have my reproductive rights enforced. Now, for those of you, yes, that don't understand the juvenile court process, yeah, here's another lawsuit. When is a juvenile a juvenile? At the time of conception? Ooh, gestation? Oh, or birth? Poop. Now, let's say as a father, I would say that as soon as I had knowledge that we were going to an ultrasound where my son was gestating in the womb of my wife, yes, I think that involves a juvenile court process, and that's before the birth. Boom! Now, there's a large lawsuit in that too. Now, I just wanted to know, okay, you've always had the evidence I wasn't in Squim. You always had the evidence I wasn't in Brennan. I've sent you over 2 million emails. I've documented that my sons are in the wrong grades. And now I'm documenting that my wife was abusing my son while he was gestating in the womb. That's going to put a whole new slant on the whole idea of abortion. See, it's one thing for a woman to decide she doesn't want to give birth. Roe versus Wade, yes, it does. This is a whole new slant on that. It's a big twist. Ooch. Where I, as a father, if she had told me I had to abort the fetus, yes, or the embryo, I would have said, okay, that's your decision. But I don't think we should be married anymore. And then I would have petitioned the court for dissolution of marriage. Now, that would have been before we went to Guam. Now, I'm going to want those reproductive rights enforced today. I'm going to want child abuse and child maltreatment, civil rights of my sons enforced today. And then I'm going to want to find out exactly what Maryland thinks about all this, okay? So for every corrupt police officer right now, I'm going to make absolutely fucking sure that the whole world knows about the reproductive rights of men.